The leader who's joining us today is Elizabeth Hadley, and she has turned many a movement into movements, from Mississippi to right here in Texas. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to get to talk about this with you.
Yes, I am excited to have you here because over the last 10 years. Tell us a little bit about the policy campaigns that you've worked on, as well as your trajectory from being an advisor for people in the Senate, the U.S. Senate that is, to now as a lobbyist.
Sure. Well, I guess, the political bug bit me early, and I knew when I was in college that I wanted to go to DC. I wanted to work on the Hill and see what that life is all about in terms of policy. So right after law school, well, I should back up. In college, actually, I interned for a U.S. Senator and loved it and wanted to go back. So right after law school, I moved to Washington, D.C. and was fortunate to get a job with the Senate Majority Leader at the time, who was one of my senators from Mississippi. And I got to work on foreign policy, and it was a fantastic experience. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Then it was time to sort of come back home, get back down to the South, and went back to Mississippi, where I began to practice law. And then my husband and I moved to Austin 11 years ago now, which is hard to believe it's been that long. And I knew that I wanted to be back in the government and policy space again. And so I got a job in the Texas Capitol and worked for a state senator there, where I was general counsel and policy advisor. And that's where I really, started my roots and started in terms of the Texas policy world. And after doing that and working as assistant commissioner for a state agency, I joined my law firm, Greenberg Traurig, where I've been for about 6.5 years, and I'm now a shareholder. So as you said, it's really been an evolution of my career and the things that I've done, but I couldn't do what I do now had I not done all the other things leading up to that. So I'm in our government law and policy section as a shareholder, and I work on a number of different policy areas in front of the Texas legislature and state agencies and governor and things like that. And then tied to that, I get to do the same thing for some pro bono clients on the legislative side, which nicely, I think, ties into the work that I also do in the community and how we first met at the Junior League. So I have to say, I have to thank you for being one of the first people actually to hire me as a contract lobbyist. So you're part of that evolution. And when I first started lobbying about 8 years ago, and you hired me to be a lobbyist for a Heart Association. So that was great to get to learn about the policies there and work with that team.
So I definitely want to go back to that, because there's so many stories about building movements and the work that we've done together. But you said so much. One thing that I really want to put a pin in is the pro bono part. Mm-hmm. When people hear the word lobbyist, a lot of people put their nose in the air, or they think money, fancy dinners. They really don't know that there are leaders who do good in that space, and there are leaders who actually do work for free. Yep. So tell me a little bit about how you know which client to select.
Sure. So, I get to work with a lot of fantastic clients, from companies to nonprofits, and it's just great to get to work with elected officials and staff to achieve positive results for my clients. But it really takes it to another level to get to do something for a nonprofit entity where it's truly pro bono work, and we're doing something that is making a direct impact on someone's life. So I would like to think that I sort of helped create somewhat of a movement, at least within my own firm, for pro bono legislative work. I guess last session, a partner in our Houston office called and said, hey, I'm on the board for this great nonprofit. They really need some legislative advocacy help on this issue they're trying to work on in Texas. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. Let me take a look. So in our firm, it's very much encouraged to do pro bono legal work. Our associates have a required amount of hours that they are to complete each year. So I'm fortunate to get to work in a place that really values that. And when I brought this up, I said, this is not the traditional pro bono legal work, but I'd love to do this legislative pro bono work. And I got a resounding yes. So I worked on a bill last session, and I have another one this session. And in terms of how you choose these clients, I think they just sort of come to you through the connections that you have, which is such a big part of this business. And last session, we were able to pass legislation to essentially end forced underage marriage in Texas, which people were shocked to hear is even a thing, and that there was no floor for the age of marriage in Texas. And we had thousands upon thousands of people, getting married off at 12, 13 years old, and those are just not generally good situations. So it was great to be able to put an end to that and create policy that really impacted so many lives in Texas.
Yes, and changing systems, when you do work on a bill like that, and you're giving someone who might get married at the age of 12 or 13 a whole new lease on life, and changing that whole situation for that person. This will be one of the last questions that I ask you. We talked a lot about the why and the what in passing laws, and I want to get to the how. Okay. And we've done some really fabulous things together, from working on policies around physical education to even some things about CPR. One of the bills we worked on was requiring CPR for high school graduation in all Texas schools. And when you first say that out loud, you might think, easy peasy, who's going to say no to that? But probably one of the most difficult things that we worked on. Tell us a little bit about the steps it took to make that bill actually reality.
Yeah, that was a great bill to work on for the American Heart Association, and I can remember sitting in the gallery and watching the votes as they came in, and like you said, who would have thought somebody would have a problem with that? But as it turns out, they did. So a big part of working on policy in the state legislature or in DC and all the things that I do is really coalition building in the relationships that you have and knowledge of the process. So, part of my job as a lobbyist is to know the process and when to make certain moves and who to pick as your bill author to make sure that you can get things through, and then also working with other stakeholders in the process. And that includes people who support what you're doing, but you also, as you know, often have to deal with people who don't want you to succeed because for some reason or another, they don't like the impact that it may have on what they do. So, we had to do a lot of working with all those different kinds of groups and really building our support with the people who did support the legislation and the legislative members to get that through. And it made, a really impactful difference. I know that you all have had stories of kids who have said, I took CPR, in 9th grade, and I was able to use it to save someone's life at a football game because a teacher or a coach dropped and I was able to go over and do that, or I was able to use it on a family member at home. And so we know that makes such a big difference. So I think it's just important, in what we do to have the fortitude to keep going and push through even if things that you're working on maybe have some resistance.
Yeah, fortitude. That is one of my favorite words and something that I definitely use in lobbying every day. But you talked a little bit about, people who might not want you to move forward. I call those people dream killers. They are never fun. And I mean, who wants to work on an obstacle every day? I love the good days at the Capitol. But if you go to my website, terribwilliams.com, sign up for the monthly newsletter, you will get a downloadable worksheet that will help you think about the dream killers, but also those people that will help you as you build movements such as this one at any state capitol. Now, there's one trick that Elizabeth didn't mention, and one thing that we use to get us through that session, and I need you to tell them the story about something that comes in a tube that gives you a superpower.
So Terri and I have a funny thing where we say we've got to put on our red lipstick if it's a day that you've really got to go be powerful and forceful. And I just texted her the other day on something I was working on completely separate and unrelated. And I said, it's a red lipstick day. And she knew exactly what that meant. So it's, whether it's your pearls, which I have used in the past in many of my movements I've worked on, or the red lipstick or the dress or suit that makes you feel good, there's those little things that just help give you that little boost of power to get you through.
That's right. And to this day, if I have a tough day or no one's ahead, I will go get a new lip gloss.
That's right.
And it sounds so funny, but those things that give you power actually help the movement within. And that will be our next topic that we will have. So stay tuned to Movement Maker TV for more of the how, why, and the what in building movements. Let's build movements together.